Hello and welcome to another demonstrational video here at Emm-Bee. This time it's the 2010 Swift Voyager 635 EK. So we'll run around the outside showing you the controls there, and then we'll move on to the inside. We'll do it that way. So first things first, on this model, if you want to open up the bonnet, then it's this catch here, which is just on the side. You may notice there's a dash panel missing there. We're just fitting an aerial for the radio, so those parts just need to be replaced. So if you pull that handle, that releases the bonnet. While we're here, just note that the toolkit is just underneath that seat there. There is a tyre pressure panel here, just to tell you what the tyre pressures are. It is worth just referring to the actual tyres themselves, because they do use motorhome specific tyres, so the actual tyres pressures could be slightly different to as displayed on here. While we're here, the fuel filler is filled here. You do need a key for that, so you'll need the Fiat key, and so that just goes into there, and you need to just hold the cap as you turn in the key, but that's where your diesel fuel goes. So one more noteworthy thing, just while we've got the door open, to open the blinds, to darken off the blinds, this little clip here, you just clip that across, and it's a magnetic strip which keeps the darkening blinds in place. Same on the quarter light here, and then it's a similar operation on the windscreen. With this one, what you do is you lift these little tabs up, lift the top one up, the bottom one down. That draws across like so. There's a little notch cut out there to make way for the rear view mirror, and it's exactly the same operation on the driver's side. They draw together, and there's a magnetic strip which holds them in place like so. When you're returning these, just make sure that those catches are in place. Obviously, if you're cornering and this blind comes across, it can impede your vision, which you don't want while you're driving as a safety feature. When you're putting these back, just make sure that that goes back straight like so, and that's how the darkening blinds operate. Okay, so to open up the bonnet, just lift underneath here, lift the catch up. Okay, so your stay just goes into here. While we're under here, you've got your washer fluid fill there, power steering fluid, coolant, brake fluid, oil fill, dipstick just there. If you ever need to jump start the motorhome or jump start another vehicle from it, lift up this little tab here. Your positive terminal goes onto there, and your negative or black cable goes onto there. So positive onto here, red cable, black onto here. So that's to jump start the vehicle or jump start another vehicle from it. Okay, so we'll move on around the outside of the motorhome then. Okay, so to fill the water tank up, so it's got an onboard water tank, you just fill it here with a hose. You will need the key for that, very similar to the diesel fill. So you've got two sets of habitation keys. So the habitation key is this one here. Okay, so to put that in there, you need to hold the handle as you turn in the barrel of the key. So once you've done that, you push the barrel in a little bit, turn it around, and that's where you fill the water into the motorhome. Okay, so you just fill that until it pours out. It is very important that you drain that down in freezing weather conditions. If water's left in the tank, it'll expand, it'll crack the tank or damage some of the pipe work. So just drain it down whenever you're not using it really, but it's very, very important in freezing weather conditions. Okay, next one along is the vent for the boiler. Okay, so when the boiler's operating on gas, you will get steam and exhaust from the boiler rising up here. It's perfectly normal to see steam rising up against the motorhome here. So it's just important that you keep that free of debris, and if it's close to any obstacles like a hedge, there's a sensor in there, so it just needs to be kept free so that it can breathe. Next one along is the electric feed. So that's where the electric cable is plugged into to get an electric 240 volt electric supply into the motorhome. So you plug it into there. When you've plugged it in, if you just to release the cable, there's that little blue handle there. If you push that down, that releases the cable from the side of the motorhome. Okay, so there's a little tap underneath here. This is to release the wastewater, so everything that goes down the sink in the kitchen, the shower and the sink in the bathroom ends up in a tank, and it is released just via this handle here. So that's open, that's closed. Okay, there's an indication on the control panel inside, which we'll come to in a second, which tells you how full or empty this tank is. Also, it'll tell you how full or empty your freshwater tank is, and we'll come on to how to drain your freshwater tank when we go inside. Next thing along is the toilet waste container. Okay, so this is referred to as a cassette. All the toilet waste ends up in here, and to empty this, there's an indication on the toilet itself. When we go inside, I'll show you that, but how full this is. So to empty this, when that indicator shows you that it is required to be emptied, all you do is lift this handle up here, slide the cassette out, and then in theory this would be full of toilet waste. Okay, so to empty that, slide that nozzle forward, unscrew the cap off the end. Okay, and with the cap off the end, I'm just going to put it back on for now. With the cap off the end, you turn this upside down, pour the waste away. As you're doing so, press this button in here. It will let air in as the liquid is flowing out from that end. This requires a chemical. You can either use blue or the green biodegradable. Blue is better in my opinion, but it's up to the user. To fill this full of the chemical, once you've emptied it, what I tend to do is, once it's empty, slide that panel back, open this blade up like so, and what I tend to do is fill it full of fresh water, then close this up and then give it a rinse, a shake about, and then pour it out again. Then it's ready to put the chemical into. Okay, so to do that, you just slide that back again, pour the required amount of chemical into here, and just line it with a little bit of water in the bottom, and then it's ready to use again. Okay, so before you put this cassette back into the vehicle, just make sure that this is fully closed and straight like so. Slide this back on, and then it's ready to put back into the vehicle. To do that, you just place it in its housing, slide it back until the handle clips back in position. That is lockable, and you need the key that I showed you before, which is the habitation key. Okay, so this model has been fitted with a bike rack. To use the bike rack, you just pull this section down. Okay, so with that section pulled down, what happens is the bike's wheels sit onto these chocks here, and then these slide over the top just on a ratchet like so. So you take that completely out, slide that over the wheel, and that keeps the bike in position here. And then these blocks here fix onto the crossbar or the seat upright to keep the bike in position. So you've got the wheels fixed here, and then obviously these three different lengths are for the corresponding rails here. So that's what keeps the bikes in position once they're mounted on with the wheels here. That just slides back into position and clips on with these clips. There's a reversing camera just there. The lens just needs to be kept clean. Obviously if there's water on there, you will get a distorted vision through that camera. This model's got an awning. Now there is a separate video on our YouTube channel that's showing you how to operate the awning, which I'll try and remember to put in the description for this video, but a quick search on our YouTube channel will show you the operation of that awning. So on the side panel here, we've got the gas locker. Okay, so this will take two 6 kilogram bottles. So once it's in there, another spare one can sit in here. This is a gas regulator, so that regulates the pressure from the bottles. It will require a hose to go from this regulator that feeds off like a flexible hose and then goes into the bottle itself. So I'll see if I can get you one of those on the day that you're collecting. But all that does is it screws into there, and then the other end screws into the bottle, and then the bottles have got taps on the top. You just unscrew the tap on the top, and that's what switches the gas supply on to the motorhome. Again, it's lockable just with the key which I showed you. Okay, so we'll move on inside the motorhome. Okay, directly above the entrance door here is the main control panel. To switch that on and off, it's this button here. Okay, so on this side here, we've got the button for the water pump. Okay, so to switch that on, you need that switched on basically in order to pump water from the freshwater tank, which I showed you how to fill outside, through all the pipe work, and then eventually it'll come out of your tap. It is important to prime the system, so what you need to do is fill up the water tank first, switch your water pump on, then come to your tap and switch it onto the hot side, and you'll get water spluttering out of this tap here. What that's doing is pushing all the air out of the pipe work through the boiler, and then eventually you get a pure flow of water coming out of your tap. It's important to do that before switching on the heating and the boiler, otherwise you switch on the boiler and you're just heating thin air. Okay, so very important to prime the system, waiting until you get a pure flow of water coming out of that tap, and then you can then switch the boiler on. Okay, so back to here then. We've got lights on here, so that's the external light on the outside, or the awning light on the outside of the motorhome. This switches all the lights on the inside of the motorhome. So you can see there, when the customer first looked at this vehicle, there was some lighting issues which we've resolved. So all of these lights are operational. Okay, so next to that then we have the indication to say that we've got a main supply coming in. You can actually switch that on and off, but that's indicating that we've got a main supply coming in. That switches on and off the 12 volt circuit in its entirety. This will actually run you through the various levels. So you've got your fresh water and your wastewater. You've got your leisure battery as indicated by the back section of the motorhome. So we're actually plugged in here, so we've got a charge coming in, so we've got 13.3 volts. Same on the cab battery. So that's the indication for your batteries. What this does is it tells you what level of ampage is being drawn or applied. So in this case we're plugged in, so we've got ampage coming into the cab battery. And a further press on the centre just takes us back to the beginning. So we've got a time indicated, a symbol there to say that we're plugged into mains. We've got a date and a temperature. We've got a smoke detector just here. So I'll work around the motorhome in a methodical manner and just go around in a clockwise fashion. So we've got fire extinguisher just here. This model, just worth knowing that the table is in a housing just here. Okay, so that's got a single leg on it. Okay, so the table has got clips on it like that, and clips onto this rail here, and then the single leg is just extended like so, and then to release that you just push that button in and it allows you to fold it flat. The clips clip onto the rail, which is just here, to get the table in position. You can see how they just clip on like so, and the leg has got a little catch that it sits into there. To make the bed up here, what you do is you just pull out this section. Okay, just make sure you come back straight with that, because it is easy to let those lats fall down the centre. And then there's a retaining lug just there that this front section sits into. So that bridges the gap for this section of the bed. To extend that, pull this catch down like that, pull these extensions out, and then this cushion that's on this side here has got a hard back, and that sits, so you pull this one out as well, and then that cushion that I've just shown you there sits in this section here to bridge the gap between those two. To fill the section in the middle here, you're using these cushions. So you take those cushions off, sit them in the centre, so that one in the centre and also that one in the centre here. So that's the bed operation. You can actually use this then if you've taken that off as a single bed as well. Okay, so you've got seat belts either side, 1, 2. The retention clips are just there for the seat belts, exactly the same on that side. The freshwater tank is housed in this area here, and I mentioned the importance of draining that down. Whenever you're not using it really, you don't want stagnant water sitting in the tank, but especially in cold weather conditions, you definitely don't want that freezing inside the tank. So to drain the tank down, you lift this hatch up, exposing the tank. You take this cover off here, unscrew it. In the bottom of the tank, you might just be able to see there's a plug, a red plug there. So if you take that plug out, that lets all the contents of the freshwater tank drain out onto the floor underneath the motorhome. So when you put that back on, just make sure it's on tight, because when you're filling the tank from outside, it'll actually try and pressurise past that seal. Okay. This actually has a swivel seat, so that little lever there, if you just pull that lever, it'll allow that seat to swivel. The bed up here has got a ladder, which is... the ladder's actually underneath this bed, so if I show you how this will actually lift up. So you can lift this up, just gives you a more airy feel in this area, and then the ladder is just here, and the winder for the awning is there as well. It's got an occasional table which is adjustable. You can see there it's got a winding handle on it. That'll sort of come out as just an occasional coffee table. Underneath this section here, I'm going to take the cushions off, but that's where the boiler is housed, so I'll come to that now. Okay, so underneath this section, I've just lifted that up. The leisure battery is just here. I think we fitted a new one to this, so the leisure battery is housed just there. Okay, so this is the hot water boiler. It also deals with heating the motorhome as well, and I'll show you the controls in a second for that. But that's where it's housed, and again, this is another important vessel of water that doesn't, it needs to be drained down. Whenever you're not using the vehicle or in cold weather conditions, very important that you drain all the water out of this, because if water freezes in there, it'll expand, it'll crack the boiler. To do that, it's this little lever here. So that is in the open position, that's in the closed position, so it must look like that. That little lever must be horizontal. If it's not in that position, all you're going to do is switch the pump on. Water will just pour out onto the floor through this valve. Okay, so to get it into the operational position, that is how it must look. And that is open, so I'm just going to leave it open now. So you won't get any hot water through the system if that valve is open like it is there. They're just gas isolation taps. Shouldn't really need to do anything with those. They'll just isolate the boiler. I'm not sure what the other one is, but one will be for the boiler. In fact, I think there's just one there, isn't there? That's blanked off. So yeah, there's just one for the boiler, so that will isolate the gas supply to the boiler. I'll show you the controls for that boiler now. They are just next to the main control panel, which we've just looked at. Okay, so we're back to the position here above the door. So these are the controls for the boiler. Okay, so these little pegs here, if you see those, and they're both in that position, then everything's off. Okay, so we'll deal with this side first. Okay, so this is going to run it on gas, basically. So the symbol here, when it's on gas, that's just going to run it on gas. The two upper ones are 1 kilowatt of electric, 2 kilowatts of electric. The reason for that is if you're on a low ampage site, then you're in danger of blowing the fuse if you put it on the 2 kilowatts. Okay, so 2 kilowatt, 1 kilowatt of electric, gas only, gas and 1 kilowatt of electric, gas and 2 kilowatts of electric. Okay, so that's your fuel selection. On this side here, we've got how you want the boiler to operate, basically. So that's in here, we've got heating only, heating and hot water on 60 degrees, hot water only on 40 degrees, hot water only on 60 degrees. So those two upper positions were like summer settings where you just want hot water but no heating. Back to the middle, it's off, heating only, heating and hot water. You've probably seen a green light come on there. The green light indicates that the boiler has ignited and is operational. If a red light comes on behind here, then it indicates that the boiler has failed, generally because the gas from the gas locker hasn't reached the boiler yet and properly ignited. If that red light appears, the boiler will not ignite. You've got to switch it to off and then start the ignition process again. So let's say we wanted heating and hot water. You'd have to wait for the green light to illuminate, and there'd be no present red light. Okay, so that's how the boiler operates. If the red light shows there, then the boiler hasn't lit and it won't light. You've got to start the process again. The central dial is the so if you line it up with this 0 here, you can probably see the numbers on it. That's the hottest setting on 5, then we're going down to 4, 3, 2, 1. So that's how you alternate the temperature that you want the motorhome heating to be set at. Okay, so we've got the boiler in here. In the wardrobe, there's a television aerial. To operate that, you just unscrew this from here, push the aerial up through the roof, and then you can adjust the position of the aerial to allow you to get a better signal. This is an amplifier for the aerial, which is just there. Okay, so you can see that illuminated. That just amplifies the signal for the aerial. This is a solar controller, so that's controlling the amperage that's being fed into the battery from the solar panel. So that won't overcharge. That'll never overcharge the battery. Underneath here we have some fuses and a circuit breaker. So we've got the circuit breaker for the mains electric here. It's like a domestic circuit breaker. Okay, so you've got 3 separate circuits there. If they're in the down position like so, then they have broken the circuit basically, so that they're like fuses. You can test that you've got a main supply coming into the motorhome by pressing that button there, and that will flip this down. So that's a sort of fail-safe test to make sure that you've got mains electric coming in. But you can also look on the control panel and that'll indicate that you've got a main supply coming in. We've got a bank of 12-volt fuses. Okay, so all the circuitry like the water pump, the lights, etc. will run through this fuse box. They're actually indicated on there. There's a key to show you which fuse is which. Okay, so into the bathroom. Basically, to operate the toilet, I know this customer's actually had a motor before, so I'll be familiar with this, but I'll show you. This will swivel, so obviously swivel the seat, lift the lid up, open up this blade here, and that opens up the blade which is attached to that cassette which I showed you outside. Okay, so open up the blade, use the toilet, press the flush button here, so that'll flush around here. And then make sure that you close the blade back up, particularly when you're travelling, because you don't want the toilet waste sloshing around in there. And then when the toilet cassette requires emptying, there's an indication there that lights up to tell you it's full. The doors on the shower are just kept in position by these little levers here, so you can see that those doors will separate off the toilet and this section, so everything doesn't end up getting wet. Fairly straightforward. The hob, it's got an electric ring. If this electric ring is hot and left hot, and you pull the lid down, it can it'll still radiate heat, so it can crack this lid. So just make sure that's cooled down before you bring the lid down. Fridge is a 3-way fridge, so to switch that on and off, it's this button here. Okay, so switch it on. To scroll through the different power outputs, okay, so you're pressing this button here. So you can select 12 volt, that will only work while the engine is running. Gas perfectly efficient, will cool the fridge and is a good cooler. And mains electric. You can also scroll through and select auto, so that will automatically select the most relevant power source. So it'll look for electric first, then it'll try and find gas, then 12 volts. So if you've got it on auto, saves you the hassle of having to remember to switch between fuel, whichever is the most relevant fuel for you. So if you leave it on auto, that's the best way. You can select the temperature here. So on a hot day like today, you probably want this fridge to work harder, but in freezing conditions outside, there's no point having this working to its maximum because it'll just ice up inside. So that temperature is relevant to the ambient temperature outside. So to open it, you just lift this catch up here. If you leave the fridge door closed for any length of time, as with any fridge, you'll get stagnant air building up in here and it'll start to smell. You don't want that, so there's a little catch on the bottom here that folds onto a corresponding peg on the bottom of the door here. Just keeps the door slightly ajar, allowing the fridge to breathe, so therefore smells don't build up in there. Okay, so that concludes the demonstrational video. There may be some questions that have arisen from that video, but I'm happy to answer those in the interim between now and collection, or indeed on the day that you collect this lovely new Swift motorhome. So we look forward to seeing you then.